Welcome to the Truth About Ag. I'm gonna start with some thank yous today before we even get into this. So a couple weeks ago, I came to Kristjan, and there was a fundraiser coming out of Alberta called the 10 and 10 and 10, and a network of ours was going to run 10 marathons in 10 days in 10 different cities. So we kind of got behind it, and I thank Kristjan for doing some matching donations through the Deep Roots Foundation we have, and put it out there. And honestly, the last number I think we hit was 21K, which is well above what I thought we'd ever hit. So what we did is we fundraised, and we're now in charge of the Regina race, which is awesome. And I want to thank Dean and the partners at MNP, Darcy, Roxanne, Wayne, for being part of this, as well as just a few shout outs I wanted to give to start this. So Riley Richards, him and his dad Rod, I've their clients. I've had great relationship with them, and they've got a story as well when it comes to special needs. And then Jeff Pizzi, Colin McLean, Mark Dolan, just to name a few. So thanks guys for that. And I'm going to take the kids down. We're going to attempt to do some of the race. I'm not doing 42K because I'd like to be around.
I need to match donations, I'm not talking the boys. I'm talking your hospital bill. You might have big muscles, but I've seen your cardio.
If I can make it 2 clicks, that's what I'm going for. 2K. So yeah, I just wanted to start out by thanking everybody. I mean, everybody knows our story with the 2 boys with autism, and it's been a great to see some guys reach out. So special thanks there. So welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, distributed under the Real Ag Media Network and powered by the Heber Group of Companies. Our first repeat guest today, the man, the myth, the legend. Clip.
Pretty low in the talent pool that they have, and we're at the bottom of the barrel.
We're revolving. It's too close to seating. It's too hard to get, guys.
Yeah.
So I am not going to do any intros. We're going to go right into it. Now, Monday, Election Day. That's where we're starting, Hebes. If we see a conservative government, what do you think changes for agriculture?
Well, I mean, Dean and Wayne would have a heyday if that. And so number one, I like it, is the capital gains rule. So, to be honest, I had a number of conversations. So that obviously the conservative platform says basically no capital gains as long as you reinvest it in Canadian businesses or Canadian stocks, right? I had this discussion. I think Dean had been part of it a few times. I didn't mind the old inclusion rate that the Liberals did, to be honest. I just said, if you sell to a Canadian citizen or a Canadian small business, and specifically if you sell your small business, right? Yep. I think it should be capital gains exempt. I think we want to keep everything Canadian. We want to make Canadian businesses billion-dollar businesses, right? And right now, the examples I always use is Versatile sold to Russia, the Seed Hawk sold to Vaterstat, non-Canadian. And not saying they're not doing a good job, but why wouldn't we give Canadians a better deal to keep it in Canada and try growing it? It's one of our weaknesses. So this is a variation of that, and I think you'd see it fire up all entrepreneurs, but it works really good. It works really good in agriculture too. There'd be a lot of succession plans.
Bring it around.
A lot of succession plans that would happen in a hurry. What I don't like is it also works really good for, say, the housing guys and cooperatives and trusts. So I don't think it would do what they want on the housing side, but it would be really good for giving a reason for succession plans to happen.
Dean?
No, that's stupid. We don't want to do that. That's protectionism, and we got to let the market flow and let the best, most creative people take over these businesses. So in no uncertain terms, right, I have no desire to do that. And really what we need to do is I'm against my intuition is always to keep taxes low, and we need to do that, but we're fiscally irresponsible now. So I actually think the inclusion rate should have changed. Then the Liberal government history of extreme fiscal mismanagement, and maybe to be fair, not the Liberal governments, but the Trudeau governments have been historically financially disasters
Yeah.
And to get the fiscal affairs of our nation back in order, we probably need the 2/3 inclusion rate. But make it simple. Don't make this rule and that rule and the chaos that they were inventing in Ottawa just to add the complexity to the administration system.
Okay. Now let's play the other side. 130 billion of extra spending from our Liberal platform. Agriculture going to see any of that, Heaps?
No. No. Well, it'll devalue our dollar, which I guess increases my commodity prices because I sell the majority of stuff into the U.S. It won't be good for equipment. Who knows what it like? The weird part that I wish I had a crystal ball on, and I think everybody does, is real estate in the next decade, and then I'm not worried about 50 and 100 years. I'm saying the next decade, right? Because it's a hard asset. Obviously, we all know what farmland prices have done. If you pay attention to gold, we know what it's done. Christ, even Bitcoin in the last decade, right? Now, like, how long can we keep printing money where people think they should invest in hard assets and a stock market that is really all based on 50% plus of printed money? That part, we had a quick conversation before this on some stuff that 10 years from now we'll know the answer. And I don't know that there's a better answer than 10 years from now we'll know the answer, right? Because I'm a full believer that right now Trump's trying to drop the 10 and the 30-year bond to redo his debt. And it was working the first month of his term, and the last 2 weeks has been a goddamn disaster. The stock market's dropping and the 10 and 30-year bonds are going up, which shows you that people are worried about the stock market.
Well, and fun. Go ahead. Sorry, Evan.
No, I was just going to say the few U.S. guys we have in the coaching program have also mentioned that every time they get an additional subsidy, it just goes back into land. Like it's just driving the cost of land. Go ahead, Deep.
Yeah, well, you know my stance. I'm always a fiscal conservative, even though I'm a senior ag advisor for M&P. I don't think it makes any sense to give money to rich farmers, and that includes my good friend Kristjan and Evan Shout. I don't want any of my I don't want any of my taxpayer dollars to go to them directly. But I haven't read Carney's policy in detail. But if he was truly spending on core important infrastructure, power lines, rail lines, ports, distribution corridors, pipeline right-of-ways, and actual core investments, then I could bite my lip on some overspending. But if it's just a redeploying and redistribution of capital amongst a bunch of taxpayers, lobby groups, that doesn't make any sense. What do you realize?
You're saying that wind farms, solar farms, and EU, sustainability premiums and carbon tax aren't good investments?
Yeah. I struggle with the return on those.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong though. So I was in Ottawa, maybe a month and a half ago, Shout.
Yep.
And then I did the Farm Fuel and Fertilizer Conference in Regina that the Sask Chamber of Commerce put on, and I give them credit. Like, it was a good conference. There's some good speakers there. I heard some really interesting stuff. Even the CEO of CN, like she said, how do we find ways where small companies and farms could build their own loop track and bring cars to the track so that they can always pull 135 cars? That's where they're going to, see their best number. Now, let's be honest, CN and CP do have the highest increases in freight rate globally in the last decade too, so don't feel too sorry for them. But from a operations guy, that made sense to me, right? But how do we actually work our way towards, like, how do we use this crisis? So interprovincial trade, infrastructure, like, how do we get this dream of a 50-mile corridor right from Victoria to PEI that's open for energy and infrastructure, and let's not just talk about that. Let's talk about a 50-mile corridor straight north from the United States in each province up to that corridor. So how do we have one from Ceres? Because, we've got Buffett right at Estevan, right? Up to the GTH in Regina. Because at some point in time, we have to invest in those assets, the ports, the rails, and
and we need management of those, or we can't be held captive from cartels, whether it's the union cartel or the rail cartel, or we should have open and competitive environments where at all possible. And we need to really think about how we structure that for the next 100-year growth. because no matter what, HGV has to compete with farms all over the world that are a lot closer to tidewater than Moosomin and Fairlight, Saskatchewan, right? Geography is an enemy of ours, no matter how you slice it, and we need to really focus and be damn good at it.
Well, and that leads into the question. I mean, if we have another Liberal government, we're going to hear the separatist talk, and it's going to go through the roof. Without any access to port, could Alberta and Saskatchewan ever actually do that?
Well, number one, you need a referendum. I mean, they went through the process with Quebec, but you got to remember, like, the second piece is, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but the goddamn king even has to sign off on it.
Yeah.
It's like, I went down the rabbit hole of couldn't sleep one night back when Trump was talking 51st state. And I mean, it goes right to the point that the United Kingdom would have to become part of the process. The U.S. is even harder because it's 50 independent countries held together by a confederation. It's not even really one big country. So it's even harder to ever add something to. But I'm not saying the discussion shouldn't happen. Only because I mean, there is true argument that the West, but the kicker is that I'm not sure BC would always agree, but Alberta, Saskatchewan specifically, and sometimes Manitoba. I mean, we want Manitoba. They get their hydro is cheapest power there is here. Right. That there has to be some real discussions around transfer payments and how the country is being run, and how assets are being exploited for maybe not a lot of return.
Well, and don't forget the CPP Ponzi scheme that it was designed as a Ponzi scheme and is just continuing as a Ponzi scheme. And they say it's properly, it's actuarially sound. When you give the actuaries the basis that it's a Ponzi scheme based on these calculations, they say, well, yeah, then it's sustainable as long as you predict the next 2 generations' birth rates and in incomes. But the transportation corridor through the negotiations, if the Buffalo region was separate, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, or some combination thereof, the negotiation with BC would be reciprocal, right? We need access to their port and pipelines to move across their nation and their territory, but they need to access Eastern Canada or Central Canada and Eastern Canada and the U.S. through our territory, right? So there's a pretty solid negotiation that could occur, and I don't believe one's more beholden to the other. There's mutual beneficial official arrangements there.
Well, I mean, doesn't this go right into the discussion that's happening now in that there probably needs to be a lot more effort put into bilateral trade agreements globally, but also that's the talk of interprovincial trade, right? But bilateral trade agreements versus these ones that have 19 countries and nobody really understands. I mean, I got good buddies in the shipping industry that say like they'll have a ship caught up across the world and they don't even know who to talk to at CFIA under which agreement and which new rule is screwing them, right? But I mean, I tell this to shout all the time, like living in Moosomin, Saskatchewan, I'm an hour from Brandon, I'm 2 hours from Regina, I'm 2 hours from Yorkton, I'm 2 hours from Estevan, and we can't figure out interprovincial trade on kids' sports. I can't drive an hour for my son to play hockey. I have to drive 2 hours. So my faith that we can figure out interprovincial trade is like extremely low. Because if there's one thing we all agree on, it's youth. We agree that we should do what's right for the kids. We can't even figure out how to make kids travel less for sports and have the governments work. And I'm not saying that Hockey Saskatchewan and Hockey Manitoba are government, but they're quasi-government. They can't figure that out. And so we're thinking we should be able to drive a semi-truck completely across our country without having different rules. Yeah, we should. But we'd actually have to put the end in mind and not be petty. And I think that's one of the little issues that we're really battling with interprovincial trade and our relationships around the world is pettiness.
Okay, I want to pull you back a bit. So, Liberal, Cody Blaze, AgriStability change. Good, bad, otherwise, what are your thoughts? If it were to go through, which is a whole nother conversation.
Evan, you cut out there. What changed? The 70-80?
Yeah, the AgriStability change.
Yeah.
Did you go to 80 or 90?
It went to 90. if it goes through.
Dean, you going first? Or you want me to?
90 cents on the dollar, but once you're into payment territory.
Yep. And $6 million cap.
Yeah, and double the cap. Yeah.
Good.
Well, fiscal conservative Dean always says bad. But from an actual fundamental use of the policy or of the product as a tool for our fabulous farm clients that use it, I'm not sure it matters a whole bunch. It might to the odd sizable farm on a major catastrophic event, but yeah, I don't think it's, from a farmer's perspective, I don't think it's negative. And it's not negative at all, but it's not so positive that it changes my view of it. It was always a core staple in my farm plot.
Yeah, I mean, I've said publicly lots of times that if, fiscal conservative government shouldn't be involved in farm insurance. However, we all know they're going to be from a global stage and a political stage. So I always say they should be in AgriStability and out of crop insurance, because if taxpayers knew the subsidy on crop insurance, it's astronomically higher than AgriStability. I think the 70 to 90 is a waste of time, and you're not going to get a single province to sign off on that. I think the cap is much needed and probably wasn't enough. And what I say by that is, if you just go back to the original, Cappy wrote a really good note on this. They did the research that you go back to the original calculations for the AgriStability program, and the cap should probably be 250%, not just 200%. And it's just a simple fact of when they created AgriStability, average gross revenue was $350, $400 an acre, and now it's $600-$700, which means break evens are $500, $600, $700 for guys. Not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's a acre-based program, not a farm-based.
Well, and when you look at the feeder cattle business, pretty concentrated, pretty big, and pretty low margins historically. They're working on pennies. And so in those cases, you can smash through the cap pretty quick. So I mean, and I have no trouble if we're in the game, give it to all the farms, big, small, rich, poor, doesn't matter. You have a level playing field. And by the way, there's not a perfect 100% correlation between big and great.
Oh, there's zero correlation.
Yeah, you gotta be great to be great.
Well, I think sometimes Big Grandpa was great, which then created a boatload of equity, which allowed borrowing power, right? And then there are the big ones that are just great, and there's small ones that are great.
So is there just a mass misunderstanding of this program? Because I mean, you look at social after that came out, and nobody uses it. I mean, the uptake rates are 30% or less. Yet every policy I do and everything, as Dean says, it's the highest insurance there is right now, because it's based on reactive, which we had $18 to $20 canola. Right now we're at 13. This is the top program. So why do guys hate it so much?
I don't know. From a government perspective, it's far more sound in its conceptual design, because I'll give a real simple example. And everyone thought I was biased because my wife owned 2% of GARS, and she just no longer owned 2% of GARS. She sold it. With Kristjan and her busted their tail to sell it along with the team there. But in no uncertain terms, AgriStability creates goal congruent positive behavior for farms.
Yeah.
That if Heebs is driving or let's, two of my clients in Assiniboia are farming side by side, and one of them, they both have a hailstorm, and one of them says, "Oh, I'm just going to mail in the crop and give up and collect crop insurance." And the other one says, "No, I want to push it and hold on and spray that crop and give it the nutrient and the fungicide application that it needs to heal itself. Low frost risk south of us in southern Saskatchewan and the Assiniboia region. So let's go for the crop." And you grow your way out of it on the farm that does that proper application, and you mail it in and collect crop insurance and a predictable disaster on the one that just does nothing. The taxpayer, the farmer, and everyone is better off with trying to produce that crop, obviously with sound agronomy principles behind it. But it's way better. And how many people didn't check what was going over the ass end of the combine this year? Because they said, you just go 7 mile an hour.
Fire it out.
Because the price the crop insurance is paying us is actually more per bushel than what we're sending out of the back of the combine, so we don't really care. No, and so AgriStability is better for the government, for the farm, for the whole industry. And so I don't know why it's not well.
And the irony part I love is that guys who go on and say, oh, it never paid, it doesn't work for me. Well, guess what? It's based on your historical margins. So I don't want to sound like a jerk, but either you were underinsured or you haven't grown a crop worth actually insuring. So, I mean, in that aspect, it's in the reference margin. So that's more a strategy, vision, whatever you want to call it, issue than it is a program issue.
Oh, yeah. Or and I'll let Hebes go in here, or rampant success. If I sell Evan Shout us an insurance policy and say, Evan, I'll guarantee you never make less than $400,000. And then he goes 5 years in a row and says, I never claimed once. Well, that means you made more than $400,000 or $1 million or whatever number you say. Like, if you didn't get a claim, that's good because you outgrew it.
You mean I don't want to burn my house down to get the money?
Well, I think we're twice. How long AgriStability has been around? Case AgriStability has been around for virtually the whole, mine and most of my dad's career, right? So let's call it 30 crops, and we've claimed twice. But that's a good thing, right? Right? We got a good margin that I could claim lots if we're in bad positions, but we're not. I think there's two pieces to AgriStability that lots of people don't understand, or I wish they did. One is that I do think the government should tweak it that you can do accounting for different operations.
Yeah, you're diversified.
And I'm just saying, offer the program the same to everyone. If you're a grain farm, you get treated like a grain farm. And if you're a grain and cattle farm, your grain farm gets treated the same. Secondly, is that because a lot of producers don't understand accrual accounting, which is kind of the way it's filed, it goes through the accounting system. And I mean, I'll throw Dean under the bus a little bit. Accountants are a little bit busy from December through April. So a lot of partners will just kind of push AgriStability off to July. So all of a sudden you lost money in September of 24. Your claim form's not getting worked on until July of 25. You might not see your payment till October of 25, right? So it's a delay in the payment, but that's a process thing that if farmers understood better, they could really speed that up, right? Well, and I also think AgriStability could tweak how their claims are calculated.
To be fair, I mean, I'll file ours probably in the next 30 days, right?
Yeah, we're making a push, and we've been historically bad for that, Kristjan. We're not better. We do the exact same thing. We busy filing the stuff, and the AgriStability gets pushed to the fall, to the summer and fall.
Yeah.
And this year we're trying to do a less bad job, and move, especially the high probability of payment.
Yeah.
Earlier.
And deadlines pushed you, right? Because they moved it.
But if you understand the program, the anxiety of that wait period is not near as significant.
Oh, no.
And so let's use 2 years ago show. So 2 years ago, Clip, was the first time in my career we lost yield to dry.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah, dry's you can't use
drought.
Mooseman's Rebo can't tell me about drought. So yeah.
As I got 8 inches of just pure wet snow on my ground right now, I could have rode my skidoo to work on April, whatever it is, 23rd. So 2 years ago, and we do the calculations for AgriStability and GARs, and because of obviously, our background, our banks even took that. It showed that we had one of our worst years ever, but we were allowed to include the 2 payments as receivables. We didn't even lose money in our worst year ever. And as it all shook out, I think we're within a couple $100,000 on our size of farm. We're within a couple bucks an acre on our calculations. And so like that gives you some peace of mind, right? I can still remember the day looking at stuff and be like, this is what we have it for, right?
Only Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
No, I was going to say only in Saskatchewan could you sled to work and I could bike to work on the same day. Let's pause the truth about ag to go into financial acumen. We are facing high cost of production, volatile markets. Come work with Maverick Ag. Why would you come work with Maverick Ag, Gibbs?
I'm a big believer in doing what you're good at. And so if you don't want to spend time in the details specifically of your financial management and financial acumen, then you're better off to partner with somebody. Run your farm, grow your crop, raise your animals, whatever your specialty is, and have a high level knowledge of the financial side. But let somebody work with you to get into the details and let you know when debt service is getting close to offside, what your cash flow is doing, and what months you're going to be tight so that you can run the farm the way you want to be, as perfect as possible.
Do you want someone to help you deal with the banking regime or look at your next equipment deal? Reach out to Maverick Ag. That's maverickag.com.
Yes.
I'm sick of AgriStability. Okay. Interesting. Wrote a Farmer Coach newsletter last month and honestly just made a little reference that we were seeing the banks tighten up a little bit, especially on debt service. And I had banks phoning me for the next week to talk about it. So I want a little bit of your opinion, Heebs. I mean, the rumor is that about 70%-ish of clients, ag clients in Canada, breached covenants last year. Are we seeing the start of something?
Wow. Let's ask the question for how many of farm clients even know what their covenants are?
Oh.
Less than 5%.
Yes.
Right? How many know how to calculate them is 10% of that 5%. So this could happen all the time and nobody would know, right?
Banks know.
Secondly, yes, it's happening, right, guys? There isn't an equity problem. There's a cash problem. And fixed costs. I mean, let's go back to Dick Whitman. Like we harp on labor power machinery all the time. So I'm going to actually leave that one alone and just tackle Dick Whitman's big thing is personal spending. I mean, there's guys paying themselves 40, 50, 60, 70, $80 an acre to live. That doesn't work. It might work when canola's $20 and lentils are, getting you $1,200 an acre, but it doesn't in most years. And so fixed costs and personal living have just run through the roof. And then land purchases are hard on cash.
Yeah,
I'm not saying they're hard on equity, but they are hard on cash.
And we're seeing,
Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we're seeing differentials from 10 to $50 an acre on personal drawings this year.
Well, and land appreciation doesn't put food on the table, doesn't pay debt, doesn't actually pay bills, and so it's and the banks, they get eager and they get full of piss and vinegar, and we get some crazy high, those $20 canola years and those 60-cent lentil years, and really high cereal prices. I don't know what, like Durham got to 25, 23. And I don't know what spring week hit as a cap, but those are substantial. What the banks do is the banks do average covenants. And correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, you're way more in the weeds of these than I am. But they do average debt servicing. Well, if you have a spike like that, it can buffer the reality to the bank for a couple years after. But then when you hit that inevitable wall and that spike comes off, then the bank goes, well, you borrowed too much money from us. Well, that was absolutely predictable that you were not going to be sustainable in your debt service at that capacity of purchase. And so yeah, it's going to be a real issue.
Yeah, and three things. I mean, number one, you're correct. You're not rich. We got to get that concept out of our head. You're rich when you sell the land, and most farms tell me they don't want to ever sell their land. You're not rich. So cash flow is king. Number two, I mean, we've always said the bank will give you enough rope to hang yourself. The reason I have a job is that my job's to try and make sure you don't, because the banks will always overextend, as Dean said, in the good years. And then when the bad years, they will be the first ones to send you a letter. And the third one is, what are they going to do? Well, we're starting to see restriction letters. We're starting to see cutback on owner draws. As you said, Heebs, the first place the bank goes is capital, drawings. They will make sure that you're not siphoning cash out of your company because you believe you're rich and you're using your operating credit. I mean, if you're sitting in operating credit and you haven't bought next year's inputs and you're still drawing cash out for ownership draws, you are essentially using the operating credit on your land or your inventory to fund your personal life. So that's what we're seeing. The banks are going to clamp if this does not change.
But let's
Do the
point out.
You go ahead, Kristjan.
Well, the one thing we need to point out too is, one, I agree. If you haven't pre-bought and you're deep in your line of credit, you're using it. But come on, banks. Like, for Christ's sakes, the amount of operating lines I've seen just simply backed by land that are not tied to what they're actually supposed to use. Like, let's actually get, insurance and personal guarantees to cover operating, machinery, buildings, land. If you decide to put a couple quarters on your op line, make sure you goddamn well know you did that, to have the conversation with the bank. Point number one. Point number two, how about the banks start to do something a little bit innovative? Right? So we've had CMHC mortgages on houses started at 15 years, then they're 20, then they're 25. Now they're going to 30. We can use CMHC, things like that. In today's world of land prices, I'm not sure that guys are going to get land paid off. If a young guy buys land right now, it's going to take a long time. I'm not saying it's right or wrong to buy the land, but we probably need to come up with some innovative products when it comes to long-term assets and the speed at which we're paying them off.
And the good old-fashioned punch in the mouth correction in price, in values, to get people back to reality. One of the exercises I like to do, and I haven't done it enough, is just say, take your total debt, current operating lines of credit, machinery, land, just say, here, take your total debt, and then divide it by the current spot price of canola. What's the spot price of canola in bushels? Just $14. $14. Take your total debt and divide it by $14.
Careful here.
Say, and say, okay, this is how many bushels of canola profit after you pay off all the other expenses you have to generate to pay that debt down in however long you think it's going to take. And that's a daunting number. That is a god-awful big number on 99% of farms or 80% of farms. So that brings it back to the dose of reality, because Kristjan's right. It's not an equity problem. It's a cash problem.
Well, and we're finding if you do the property, plant, and equipment divided per acre and your long-term debt provided per acre, like we're seeing swings from 500 an acre all the way to 1,400 an acre. So that's almost $1,000 an acre swing in debt profiles or equipment profiles on farms that might be the same size.
Which is fine. Not everyone's born with the same everyone's born with a different balance sheet. But if you're stretching it that far, you better be damn good, and you better have Evan Shout in your back pocket, having your insurance exactly figured out. So, because you don't have any margin for error, you get one little hiccup, and I don't give a rat's ass what your local banker is telling you. They don't make the decisions. The decisions are getting made in Calgary and Toronto, and they don't care about you if things go sideways.
Well, and
that's what their job is, to not.
And that's the other problem I have, is that if we're going to focus on pre-move insurance and that's how you pick your insurance products, we're going to have an issue, because if you are going to play high risk, which is what we're talking about, you have to spend money on insurance. I'm sorry. So whether you like it or not, the higher risk you are, the more it's going to cost you to make sure you don't go backwards.
And I think we say high risk, but I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys about risk management too, and some of the biggest complainers are the ones when they lose $1 million to equity, and they had the equity to lose. Yeah. So just the whole theory is have a risk management plan that you can't lose any more than you're comfortable with.
Yeah. On the balance.
Which I did not say that. I did not say this will only cost you $8 to not lose as much as you are willing to lose. You have to figure out how much you're willing to lose and then work backwards to what the cost is going to be and see if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
But figure out the comfortable to lose part. Now, if you're high risk, you might only be able to lose 250 grand because your work cap can't handle it, right? And if you're old and rich, you might say, I'm good at $1 million, but then ask your wife if she's good at losing $1 million. You spent 50 years making it. She might say, hey, I think we should spend an extra $3 an acre, only lose $500,000.
I had a client of mine and a good buddy of mine, Darcy Byers, in the office, one of the senior ag guys in M&B, and works with an awful lot of rich farmers. And he was yelling at the client. He said, "You don't need to pay that much for insurance. You got lots of money." And my Darcy's client and my buddy goes, "Well, I remember when I was farming, when I was poor, And I remember farming when I was rich, and I like rich a lot better. So I'm just going to buy enough insurance so that I stay rich. And that was a personal place where he was comfortable. And that's the right way to approach it. I love it.
Okay. One more question that ties to the banks. Can we actually start putting some of the blame on bankers for the financial acumen that farms have today? Have we let the industry not move forward in financial management by just providing providing loans based on land?
Heaps, you go, and then I'm going to go.
Yeah, like I don't think it's just our industry. I think the fact that we have not enough banks in Canada means that we're basically real estate lending, and that is not management lending. And if you really wanted to put a country on fire from a productivity standpoint and make a change in this world, you need to find a way to lend on management, not on real estate. Now, don't get me wrong, Dean. I mean, I'll steal this from Dean, right? Old and rich and young and full of brains is the way we talked about succession plans. And if I could only choose one, I'm probably going to full of piss and vinegar and full of brains. But in a perfect world, I have both, right? And so it's how do we actually get entrepreneur lending and then marry that together with real estate lending? Because yes, banks need to teach farms more, but guess what? Farm, you might not be cash rich, but you're worth $10 or $20 million. Part of your job should be to understand working capital and understand debt service. Like it is part of your job as the CEO of your farm, just like checking the crop is.
But is it the banks to teach or the banks to require? Because that's where I have an issue. Is you said that agriculture is no different than other industries. I don't think you play with this much debt in any other industry without having accrual numbers throughout the entire year.
And that's where I'll give, and I, as a rule of thumb, I dislike all banks a lot.
You got a lot of rules of thumb.
Yeah, and I'm an angry old guy. I'm an angry old prick. But the Royal Bank was the first one on the bleeding edge of this. So I actually blame accountants and cash-based tax, Evan, way more so than I blame banks.
Okay.
But banks got to wear not following the Royal Bank. The Royal Bank went out early and demanded accrual, even just in a semblance of a shot of it at a accrual statement, and said, if we lend you more than $500,000 or some slow number, you have to give us a stab at an accountant prepared accrual statement. Internal but make a shot at it. And they all pushed back and said that's stupid. And the other banks, when Royal was in the bleeding edge of that, the other banks should have said, great, they've opened the door. Let's follow along and get this information in, and they didn't. And it's a decade or 15 years later, and it's still not near as well understood as it should be. But I gotta blame the accounting profession, because we just believe our job is to compile the taxes and send the tax form in on their behalf and mail it out to them. We will not take a client in our office, even if they don't need to do an accrual for any other reason. We will not do their stuff if they don't do an accrual financial statement.
Well, I mean, look at Evan. Like, it's the number one thing in Maverick. We do a pro forma the year before based on accrual, and then check the actuals to it. Like, everybody that gets to accrual, I mean, eventually wants to get to kind of a scorecard type idea that we're doing, where you have an accrual scorecard that you don't even have to look at all the numbers because the scorecard tells you. But if they don't ever see how important it can be, it's hard to change, right? Like, I even like. I played lots of hockey in my life. And I mean, if you'd have told me positionless hockey was the new thing, I'd have told you you're crazy 20 years ago. But watching it, it's like, Jesus, why didn't we start doing this 20 years ago? Right? But if you don't get to see it and understand the value, you don't change.
And that's why there's lots of long in the tooth farms out there that don't have a great handle on it, don't have a great understanding of it. And they want the next generation. They genuinely want the next generation to be better. And what I tell them is I say, okay, but that doesn't mean you make them do, if they're not paper orientated or computer or detail office orientated, good, hire that out. Get someone else to do that, but get the young person to take over the farm. Get her or him to go through Evan's farmer coach or go through any number of the training to actually understand the big picture accrual of their business That's way more valuable than forcing someone who doesn't have the skills to do the details and enter every check. Because just because you're in the weeds, that I know lots of people who are in the weeds. And if I said, okay, how much money did your farm make last year? Give me your gross margin. Give me your labor, power, machinery. Couldn't do it. Like the weeds is not knowledge. Both are important.
Okay. Next topic. So we've had lots of big farms in the news lately, and I don't want to do clickbait, so I'm not going into any of them. But I had an interesting question, which led from one of the stories. Will we ever see a goodwill balance sheet for a farm?
I've seen one.
Explain.
I've seen a farm trade. It's actually a good friend of mine where he got paid goodwill. He had all daughters and he had a really good seed farm. Dean, you know who this is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying whether or not he should have, but it was a good farm and he probably should. And that's what you're saying is, can we see an operating farm trade on EBITDA so there's a goodwill number in there really because it's a multiple?
Yeah. If we pull land out into a separate real estate company, could the opco ever actually sell on a multiple?
So keep going here, Kristjan.
Yeah. So I fully think it could. And I mean, the interesting thing too is like, it depends. It all depends on how much an investor is good with lever on what they want to see for a rate of return. But
yep.
I 100% think you could. The big thing would be the farm's actually got to get that many processes in place so that people believe the number, yep. Right? You need historical evidence. And 3, it needs to be probably more of a private equity type play where it's where they use 3, 5, 7 year averages, not every individual year, right? But 100% I think it can happen.
Here's where I think the main component, absolutely, because by the way, most profitable businesses all our farms have. Everyone talks about their farm equity all came from land appreciation.
Yeah.
No, most of the profit, the highest rate of return is the operating business, give or take. For those who want simple math, I'm not a details guy. Simple math is that an operating farm takes about $500 of working capital and about $500 of machines and bins and buildings. Now, that might be, there's some of the farms that are a little higher, some farms a little lower. I like the easy math. That takes $1,000 an acre to run an operating farm. If we have top tier production in a low beta, highly sustainable profit area and cropping zone, and we can create great profits, I do believe goodwill will trade. One of the things I think is an important component of that is that the land they farm has to be locked up for an awful long time for there to be a goodwill on the operating business, that we're not susceptible to losing those acres. But I know the one Kristjan's talking about. I haven't seen it myself, but eventually, if we create really good profits and really utilize our capital well, I think it will happen.
Well, and I think part of it, and I've had this I've had this discussion with guys at the coaching is, okay, so let's look at it. Like you said, long-term lease agreements on rentals. So we got the land locked up, strong insurance policies. So we've got strong historical margins, strong policies. The volatility in income is not this. It's more like this. So we've got a sustainable company because volatility, I think, is the one reason we don't see this more often. You got a strong management team, strong processes, full career progression, once you take all those aspects in, which don't get me wrong, there's next to zero farms that have these. It does add a value where my farm versus the same size farm 20 clicks away that doesn't have these processes shouldn't sell for the same amount.
Well, and if you take rate of return, especially if there's any lever on that $1,000, number one, or if you use EBIT, right? Which someone that's rich, that's just going to write a check and not have a bunch of debt too. There's farms in Saskatchewan that are very happy that the Toronto Stock Exchange and New York Stock Exchange don't know their rate of return on their operating company.
Yeah, but how many of these farms know their own rate of return on their operating company?
I think some of the really good ones have a pretty good idea.
Pretty short list. But to have no one short.
Pretty short list. Yeah. But
okay, last question here.
Yeah, we're running out of time, Chief.
Okay, well, here, before I ask this question, Hebes, what's the plan? How long before seeding? Let's get back to just normal conversation.
May 5th at the earliest.
Ooh.
We would have been, what's the date today?
23rd.
It would have been the 26th. I would have started. And on the 22nd, we got 8 inches of heavy wet snow. And May 5th at the earliest.
And what's the perfect day you usually start?
April 25th.
So does this change Jeff's seeding window? Like, are we from 21 days down to 15 now?
It can't rain after the day we start.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's...
Tell Jeff no more air drills. Berdine.
Gonna pull you away from the podcast here to go into Farmer Coach. We have opened up the registration for November. Brand new courses, the executive, the foundations. Hebes, why would you come to Farmer Coach?
Yeah, I think 2 quick points. The first one is just a baseline knowledge around farm management, right? From accrual statements and debt service ratios to human resource policies that we've seen work on operations and businesses kind of around the world. And secondly is just knowledgeable peers. It's not just what you learn, from the coach and being in the program. It's what you learn discussing with 10, 15, 20, 25 other operations and what's worked and not worked on their operations. And I think those 2 pieces are pretty invaluable.
With more than 90 producers having gone through the course, you have an online platform. It is probably one of your largest peer groups you can be a part of. So sign up, go to farmercoach.ca, and we'll see you in November.
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is in a perfect world, I want to be done by May long. Our data shows that yields drop after that, right? But I mean, crop insurance uses June 10th for a reason. But yeah, we'll see where we're at on May long.
So I would ask what every other farm asks. Does that mean you're under equipped if you don't make it by May long?
No.
Okay. We're not buying Velmars just so we can make sure we're done by that special date.
I own a Valmar and I have a guy that does custom seeding as part of one of my deals that might go from 2,000 to 5,000 acres. But I'll still be at 100 acres a foot on my own drills no matter what.
Just ask.
Remember, Kristjan and I have been friends for as long as I can remember. And I remember when he seeded me with the Valmar for his whole canola crop, and I didn't enjoy that very much. So let's. I recommend, as a genius consultant on the 9th floor of the Royal Bank building, I recommend we not seed with the Valmar.
That made me a lot of money that year.
I know, but I still like your precision drill better.
Oh yeah, it was not enjoyable.
And Dean, on your end, we're getting to the end of tax filing dates. Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, even though I know you don't do most of the work?
Yeah, there's the complexity, just to get it put in perspective, Evan, and I don't know if most folks know this, they complain about the bureaucracy, but when 10 years ago there was 1 tax act, and now it's literally there's two. So the complexity in the paperwork and filing that's gone around it, and hell, I'm one of the guys that makes money from it, and it drives me nuts. Like it doesn't seem like the paperwork ever ends, and the administrative burden keeps falling on farms, and that's one of the things that hopefully April 28th we trim the bureaucracy up a little to make all this paper shuffle for no one's benefit go away.
Perfect. Okay, I left you with 2 minutes to end this, but let's call her quits. So I want to thank you for coming on again, Dean. First return guest, so take that as a positive.
I'll try to spin that as a positive. Thanks for
spin it as a positive. And remember, guys, that's the truth about ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Heber Group, which includes Heber Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.